All right, let's tackle one of the biggest, deepest mysteries out there, consciousness itself. We're not just asking what it does, but the much weirder question of why it feels like anything to be you. Why isn't it all just dark inside?
I mean, really think about it for a second. When you look at the color red, your brain isn't just processing some wavelength of light. No, you have a private internal experience, the actual feeling of redness. But why? Why on earth would a bunch of neurons firing produce a feeling?
And that question, well, that's what's famously known as the hard problem of consciousness. It's this giant, mysterious gap between the physical brain doing its thing and the subjective world of what we call qualia. You know, the what it's likeness of everything you experience. And honestly, it's one of the biggest unsolved puzzles in all of science.
But what if there's a new theory on the block? One that doesn't just describe consciousness, but actually tries to give us a direct, mechanical answer for how our inner world is built from the ground up. Let's dive in.
So the whole thing kicks off with this really wild idea. What if a feeling isn't a thing at all, but a process? Imagine a kind of mental echo, a loop that just keeps repeating, getting clearer and stronger with every single pass. And that brings us to the Recurse theory of consciousness, or RTC. It argues that our subjective experience isn't some extra magical ingredient. No, it says it's built from two very simple parts. First, you make a distinction, like telling the difference between red and not red, and then you recursively reflect on that distinction over and over again.
So how does this stack up against the other big theories? Well, you've got things like global workspace theory or integrated information theory, and they're great at describing what happens when we're conscious. But RTC tries to go one step further. It's aiming to explain why all that brain activity feels like something in the first place, saying that our feelings, our qualia, are the stable final product of this recursive looping process.
Okay, but how does that actually work? How do you get from a simple loop to the rich, complex feeling of being alive? Let's break down the nuts and bolts.
It all starts here, with a distinction. This is the absolute ground floor. It's your brain actively drawing a line in the sand and saying, this thing here is meaningful and it's different from that thing over there. It's the contrast, sweet versus not sweet, loud versus not loud. It is the most fundamental act of making sense of the world.
So once your brain makes that first cut, that initial distinction, step 2 kicks in, recursive reflection. Your mind doesn't just note it and move on. It loops back again and again, re-examining it, reinforcing it. And with every single mental pass, that distinction gets sharper, more defined, and more vivid.
This looping process just keeps going until the distinction can't be broken down any further. It becomes totally stable. And there's this fantastic metaphor the theory uses. It's like solving a Rubik's Cube. With every turn, things get a little clearer, and when all the pieces finally align, that click you feel, that is the qualia of red. That final aha, puzzle-solved moment, that is the subjective experience.
So you see, in this model, qualia aren't some spooky ghost in the machine. They are the feeling of a distinction finally locking into place. The feeling of redness is simply what it's like for your brain to have the red versus not red problem completely and totally stabilized.
And over time, as you do this again and again, these stabilized distinctions become what RTC calls recursive attractors. You can just think of them as deep grooves carved into your mind. They're these self-sustaining patterns that end up forming the very bedrock of your identity, your memories, and your entire perception of reality.
This whole framework also gives us a really cool way to understand why some experiences are so vivid while others just fade into the background. Your daily commute to work? That's a known distinction. The pattern is so familiar, so grooved in, that it requires almost zero reflection. It feels automatic. But your first day exploring a brand new city? Whoa, that's an unknown distinction. Your brain is forced into this prolonged, intense recursion to try and make sense of it all. And the result? A much more intense, vivid, and memorable experience.
Okay, so this is a really fascinating way to think about consciousness. But is it just a cool philosophical idea, or is there some actual science here? Well, according to its proponents, this isn't just philosophy. It's grounded in real neuroscience and makes predictions we can actually test.
And this is where, for me, it gets really exciting, because these abstract concepts seem to map directly onto real structures in the brain. The constant looping of recursion, that looks a lot like the thalamocortical loops, which are constantly feeding information back and forth. The self-reflection part? Well, that sounds an awful lot like the default mode network, the part of your brain that lights up when you're thinking about yourself. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a proposed biological mechanism.
And the best part about tying a theory to biology? It means you can test it. RTC makes these really clear, falsifiable predictions. For example, if you use TMS, magnetic stimulation, to disrupt those brain loops, a person's experience should become less vivid. Or, get this, expert meditators, people who literally train in recursive reflection, should show stronger neural signals of it. These are actual experiments we could go out and run.
So let's zoom out for a second. If this theory holds up, even just a little bit, the implications are staggering. I mean, this could change everything from how we think about artificial intelligence to how we treat mental health.
Take AI. This theory could be a whole new playbook for creating artificial awareness. Imagine an AI that doesn't just crunch data, but can recursively reflect on its own models of the world, stabilizing them, strengthening them, until they become a computational version of a feeling. Could that be the path to a machine that doesn't just know what red is, but actually experiences it? And it's not just about machines. Think about mental health. This gives us a powerful new lens. Conditions like chronic anxiety or OCD, you could see them as these recursive attractors that have become way too rigid. They're stuck in a harmful loop. And that suggests we could design therapies aimed specifically at destabilizing those patterns to help people form new, healthier ones.
So when you boil this whole massive theory down, it really comes to one powerful idea, that our entire inner world, our feelings, our sense of self, it's all built from simple, looping patterns that eventually lock into place. And if that's true, it leaves us with one last, really fascinating question.
According to RTC, your sense of I am, your very self, is probably the most stable, most deeply grooved recursive attractor you have. It's been built over a lifetime of reflecting on the distinction between me and not me. If that's what you are, not a thing but a dynamic, self-sustaining pattern, then what happens to you when that pattern is forced to change?